it's a bit of a run down those stairs, it always is, with the death of me one day. How are you, sir? You well?
I'm fine. I've got this comfortable chair and this great desk. I don't have to worry about running down the stairs. Sorry, we really should have built this studio a little differently. We could have put the hotline in the office next door, but here we are.
Well, I've got myself a little chair for the after show, so I'm quite looking forward to hopping on that and rest my pins. Shall we do some news? Let's do some news.
Let's see what we've got.
Well, first up, got a couple of stonkers here. Out of stock. We're out of stock. This takes a look at the AV supply chain, and a great piece here, just in from Paul Milligan. He says that buying an AV product is only going to get worse before it gets better. So, what were your takeaways on this one? I'll let you go first.
Well, what I enjoyed about this one, and by the way, you guys want to read this at home, look down below in the resources section. You'll find links to all the articles we discuss. This was a really comprehensive look into why are we having these problems, right? And just first thinking about the magnitude of the problems, the fact that stood out to me was Apple. I mean, obviously one of the largest companies in the world, but still they announced in Q1 this year a $3 to $4 million hit on revenue in one quarter as a result of just supply issues, not being able to provide the products that people want to buy from them. $4 billion, one company,
billion.
1 quarter.
Yeah, billion. It's just about as much money as they have in their back pocket. But then that doesn't matter. 3 to 4 billion is a lot of money. You're right.
That's it. Anything stand out for you in particular?
Oh yeah, I mean it was a bit of a oh no. Reading it through, and it's you kind of know what's going to happen next in the next paragraph, but products have become much harder to get. Prices have increased. Pain is being felt by everybody globally, and over here in the UK we had Brexit before, that thing that's been happening to us all over the place, let alone a dinghy getting stuck in the Suez Canal. That really didn't help things at all. And then Paul mentions a Chipageddon. Chipageddon, it's the new word, right?
I love that word.
The global tech manufacturers struggling to meet orders, Cisco Chief Chuck from Cisco, he's been talking to the BBC, don't you know, and reckons another 6 months of Chipageddon yet. It's Intel Pat from Intel, he also thinks it'll be longer.
You mentioned Brexit, and that brings up some of the geopolitical issues that are part of this, right? The U.S. and China trade war that kicked off in 2019 and 2020, set us up for a world where we were sort of teetering on the edge of making this easy to happen, right? So when everybody started getting sick, companies really, I think, contracted, became very conservative. They wanted to stop buying inventory. They wanted to slow down because they assumed that demand was going to correspondingly slow, and I think it did for a time. But then that leads all the sort of the core manufacturers, the chip makers, the steel producers, et cetera, to slow down their production, which takes a long time to ramp up. And then, of course, what we've seen in the last few months is this massive spike in demand as people wanted to catch up on the things that they didn't buy, as people, stuck at home, getting bored, wanted technology to play with, as in our world, in the AV world, as universities, as corporations needed to change their AV configurations to handle hybrid work and hybrid learning. Suddenly there was this massive spike in demand at a time when core manufacturing had sort of planned for a drop in demand. And you get this massive mismatch. And then something that stood out for me in that context is that unfortunately, some of the AV manufacturers end up kind of at the bottom of the list when it's time to go buy some chips to manufacture your commercial display or your AV over IP encoder. The big guys, the Broadcoms of the world and the Samsungs of the world are going to prioritize their large scale consumer level products that sell millions of units instead of tens or hundreds of thousands. That's I think a fundamental part of this challenge specific to AV.
Absolutely, and that leads us quite nicely into the second, well, not saying nicely, I'm saying nicely, really, but it leads us into the second news item, which kind of pushes it on from that, but talks about the impact on AV product prices and availability. It kind of, it builds on that perfect storm that we've just been deliberating and chatting about. And AV certainly residential AV, an area which I'm still quite well connected to, it's become a tougher place to survive in recent years anyway, as the consumer tech market rises. So an increase in prices and a shortage of supply is really just icing on the cake. One thing I found quite interesting here was Sam Taylor from Almo Pro AVs, his comments about one of the main culprits of the chip shortage being display drivers, which send instructions for illuminating screens on displays. Well, that's pretty much every display, right? And it goes on to talk about how integrators can respond, which is good, but I'll come back to that in a moment. What about you, Justin? Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that's the perfect tie between these two articles for me. The first one sort of explained how did we get here, and the second one is a little more like what does it mean for Pro AV and for prices as commodity prices go up, whether that means display drivers or steel to manufacture a housing. The manufacturers in Pro AV, many of them are being forced to raise prices just to stay afloat, right? And so then it becomes a question of, if prices are going up unexpectedly, if products are harder to get, what does an integrator do? How do you manage that? And it kind of came down to three things in the article. One was just absorb the costs, charge your customer the same and you eat it. One was try to work with the customer and say, look, the prices have gone up. If you need it now, I can get it, but it's 10% more. Or to seek alternative designs, right? And that's going to be an interesting segue into what we'll talk about with Mark in a few minutes.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's the big push, the takeaway finally from me was the fact that it does mention knowing business profitability. It's not all about tech. Be really comfortable and confident about how you're going to use the profitability in your business to help to get you out of this horrendously weird place we're in at the moment. I'm going to leave you to it because you've got an interview to do. So we'll catch you later.